Welcome to my home studio, which is also kind of like my smart home command center. In here, I get a lot of work done, whether it's for my job or recording YouTube videos, but I also use it as a place to quickly get the status of and control a lot of smart home things right here in this room, as well as around the house. So in this video, I want to show you the combination of how I automate my Mac to get a lot of things done, while also combining that with automating my smart home to make for the ultimate smart home office setup. And as you can probably tell, I record a bunch of videos here for YouTube, but a lot of these tips are not necessarily just about making content. It's about pretty much anything you'd probably do for work and how can you make that better. So starting off with something we all have to do for work these days, which is go to online video meetings. If I need to join a work meeting right here from my Mac Mini, I have a button on the Stream Deck, and that's going to go ahead and open up my work web browser with Google Meet. And it's also going to go ahead and turn on the light I use to light myself during video conference meetings, but also a light that I use for my YouTube videos. And this is a Viltrox 116T. It's just a great, simple light, and it provides great light for video, but it's also something that's easy to control with a smart plug. And that means for a lot of other automations, we can use that smart plug to know the status of, is Eric, myself, in a meeting or recording a YouTube video? So then changing status lights to let other people in the house know that's what's going on. So I have a plug-in wall sconce just outside of my office with a colored Philips Hue bulb in it, and I can turn that on and change the color to red so that people know not to come in the studio at that point. And to just let me know the status of it, I also have that same color shown on the LED light strip underneath my cabinet. And these automations involve actually a number of different sensors between, is the door closed, which is another thing that I do for a meeting or recording, as well as, am I actually in this room, with a presence sensor that I recently reviewed from LaFaer, and then also just this smart plug, is that light on or not? And these automations ended up getting a lot more complicated, so I ended up moving them over to Homey from what I was originally using, which is Apple Home. So this is my advanced flow here in Homey for the contact sensor and the studio fill light, which does that lighting for my video meetings and just goes through different scenarios, and then also sets a variable I can use in other places for, is Eric quote unquote on air. And so over here on my Stream Deck, I have the XL size Stream Deck, so I got lots of buttons here for controlling things like my office lights, or then I can turn on my office bright scene. I can toggle the filming mode, which does my lights for filming YouTube videos. I have quick access to all kinds of things I want to use on my Mac, like my UniFi dashboard to see the status on my network, as well as my UniFi cameras to look up recording history. I got quick access to Claude and Claude Cowork and Claude Code. And we'll talk about a key app that I'm using for doing all of this automation on my Mac that's linked to smart home automations in just a second. Look at that, the lights changed for my filming setup here. And while I try to keep my office running smoothly with these smart home automations, today's sponsor, CleanMyMac, keeps my Macs running smoothly. I've been paying for CleanMyMac for years with my own money, and at this point, I can't imagine owning a Mac without it. I have it in the menu bar of both my Mac Mini and my MacBook Pro. Think of CleanMyMac like a super smart robot vacuum for your Mac. It goes off and finds all the mess and potential security threats and makes it super easy to take care of them. I have lots of files in iCloud Drive and Dropbox. Those are all in the cloud, but local copies of files like video clips often stick around for too long, taking up space on my drive. Cloud Cleanup finds these files and lets me easily remove the ones I don't need on my Mac anymore. Space Lens helps you see what's really taking up space on your drive, so you can quickly free up space by removing files you don't need. Junk Cleanup is another one of my favorites. Finding system junk, mail attachments, and other stuff you don't need anymore. I also find this tool very helpful as an iOS developer for removing old simulator files and iOS device backups. The Performance module offers easy ways to review and remove login items, background items, and time machine snapshots that aren't necessary anymore. I also keep CleanMyMac running in the background, and it'll let me know when my trash is getting full of files, reminding me to empty the trash and actually free up that space. If you're not sure where to start, the first Smart Care tab will look over your machine and point out the best tools to use for your setup. Because these are all the kinds of things that are important to keep your Mac running well over time. And just like a robot vacuum does for your house, CleanMyMac does the hard work for you. To keep your Mac running smoothly with CleanMyMac and to get a 10% discount, check out the link at the top of the description. Thanks again to MacPaw and CleanMyMac for sponsoring this video. Now, for a lot of simple controls on something like a Stream Deck or really other just quick actions on your Mac, you can use Apple's Shortcuts app and then do things like controlling your smart home right alongside actions like launching a particular web browser view or an app or whatever. The sky's really the limit with shortcuts right up until you want to do a lot of custom key commands right after you open that app. See, it's nice to be able to open something like, let's say, Claude, but then when you want to navigate to a particular tab and then start a new chat, those kind of key commands get trickier to do in something like Shortcuts or AppleScript. That's where something like Keyboard Maestro, which can seem a little bit daunting at first, is actually a really good tool. Now, I barely scratched the surface with my Keyboard Maestro usage, but I have simple commands here like activating Claude and then typing different key commands to get to things like Claude Cowork or Claude Code, or just a new chat with Claude. I also find it to be a really nice way to open up things like my projects folder in iCloud or my active video drive I have attached to my Mac. I also have a bomb icon on my Stream Deck, which I use to quit all my apps. One other helpful tool you do have in Shortcuts as well, if you don't want to venture over to Keyboard Maestro, is just running a simple shell script. Now, if you're not familiar with any kind of shell script commands, AI can be a really useful tool to help you dial in exactly what you need, but I have some simple ones here that copy a template Final Cut Pro project for either my main long form videos or a short video, and then go ahead and set up the whole folder structure for that new project. It just passes in the name of the video from the shortcut and then executes the setup of the project for me right here from my Stream Deck. Test video, click done. No, this is not just a short. And there we go. All set up. And then right here on my desk, I have one of the new IKEA Alpstuga air quality sensors. These are really nice for just getting a quick read on the amount of CO2. It also can show you a handful of other things just by tapping this top button here. It'll go ahead and cycle through different options. But the key, if you work a lot in a small room in your home, keeping an eye on the CO2 levels as you're just breathing that out all day, it can really create some fatigue over time. So you'll see I've been blowing a lot of hot air for this video right now with the door shut, and that's why you see it giving a pretty high reading for what I would see in this room for CO2. And so then it's just a good reminder to open a door, let some air in with a vent, or open a window, just something to kind of balance out the CO2 levels. So speaking of being here in my office, I have this LaFaer wireless presence sensor over here on the wall to detect when I'm in the room. And this can be really valuable for a handful of automations. And I've actually found it to be a much better sensor when integrated directly into Homey as opposed to Apple Home. It really works well in Homey, and it's just nice to be able to have that as part of automations of, yeah, turn on the lights, but only when I'm in the room. And I also just have some fun accent light automations of when anybody, it doesn't identify specific people. So it's just when someone's in the room, but it's most likely going to be me. And then when I walk in the room or someone else, it just turns on the accent lights behind my desk, which I talked about in a previous video, as well as under my cabinet. And that's just kind of a nice welcoming way to make the whole room feel a little bit more personable. Coming over here, we have my 3D printer, which I've talked about 3D printing in other videos. And I actually have something else I 3D printed, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there's also something on this wall, which you might look at and think, oh, well, that's just part of Eric's smart home. But I actually really view this as a productivity tool for me as well, which is that when I'm down here in my basement office, I don't have the best visibility to what's going on in the outside world around me, particularly if I have, let's say, noise canceling headphones on like my AirPods Max, then I'm not going to hear stuff. And just off to my side view from my desk here, I can just look over and see a bunch of cameras that are pointing outside as well as inside the home to just get a quick idea of what's going on in the rest of the house. Is there anybody pulling in the driveway that I need to go up and meet? Or is my wife's car home? Or is there anything going on upstairs in the upstairs bedroom? So this can be just a really nice way to quickly, within a matter of seconds, get a view of the status of things. And this is actually using Ubiquiti's UniFi portal with the Ubiquiti UniFi system. So it's a little PoE device that I have running in my cabinet under here, and it's kind of hard to see with the lighting, but it just runs on Ethernet and then has an HDMI out, and I just hooked it up to the basically one of the cheapest portable travel monitors I could find, which is really great for something like this. And it's actually just secured to the wall with some of those like Velcro style command strips. So really great way to just get a quick view, and easy to mount, easy to set up, would be easy to take down. And I can't imagine living without this thing now that I have it running. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to access recordings of past events and something like this, but that live view is so clutch. If I want to listen to Sonos or pipe in something that's playing in the rest of the house into my studio as well, I can just use this Move 2 here. The charging base for my Move 2 just stopped working, but I just power this thing with USB-C, mostly use it as a stationary speaker these days, and it seems to work just fine, especially for filling a little room like this. Of course, my main lights here are controlled by Lutron Caseta, and any blinking you see in the video with those LEDs is just my camera settings right now. It's nothing to do with Lutron. You don't see it in person. And then over here I have an Onvis multi-control button, which I really just use the center button for. And mostly what I'm doing there is triggering my studio bright scene, which just kind of resets everything back to like a normal working setup, as opposed to anything related to filming or a web meeting or any other kind of fun things I might be doing, like watching my hidden Apple TV in this setup. So you might have heard recently that Aqara released this new P100 multi-state sensor. And let me connect that with this other idea, which is that I actually have this HDMI video switcher here called an A10 Mini Pro. Now, this is more for doing things like my live streams I do every week. So that part doesn't really apply here. You could probably simplify the setup and just remove that if it's not something you use. But then I actually have an Apple TV mounted underneath my desk, which then connects into that, which then goes into this monitor over here. So I have this monitor on a smart plug, takes HDMI in, of course, and then I split the sound to go to my Kanto U4 speakers up here on the wall, which I could also use with my computer. So then if I want to just have the Apple TV on during the day, I can just pick up the remote from over here, and then I'll set it down on the table. The P100 will register that it's been set down on the table from where it usually sits in the little 3D printed pocket on the side of my cabinet. And then it will turn on the A10 Mini Pro as well as the monitor. And then, you know, this complexity is just for me. I can just go straight to just the Apple TV view. And so now I have my Apple TV right here in my office, and I can have that off the side, maybe playing something like some live event on YouTube TV. I gotta be sure and turn on the audio on the A10 Mini, and then it can pipe it through the speakers. And this is a case where I just took a case design for an Apple TV remote case and then added a kind of cutout here in the back where I put the P100. And so this way it kind of just fits into the case. Now, I don't really have a way with the P100 to turn it off because there might be other times I'm worried about false positives of this thing accidentally turning off some stuff that's critical for my next live stream, right? So instead of doing something with the P100, I just have one of the presses of my IKEA button over here turns on that office bright scene again, and then it's gonna go ahead and turn that stuff off. So then the TV's off again. And because the P100 is a pretty new sensor, Aqara didn't really send it to me ahead of the release date or anything, so I'm just starting to play with it, and we'll see how this whole automation setup works out over time. So this video had kind of a mix of smart home and just Apple and productivity stuff in general, and if you want to see something more on upgrading your smart home, including how I made these LED lights work at the back of my desk and how I mounted them to my desk, I have a video linked here on the screen all about different smart home upgrades that I've recently done around my home and what products I chose and what I was thinking about those upgrades. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Thanks again so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.